Thanks for listening to West Indies on 99.94. I am your host, Machel St. Patrick Hewitt from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And with me, as ever, is my partner in crime, Santokie Nagulendran. On today's show, we're going to be chatting about West Indies white ball woes. Santokie, take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks for that intro, Mash. And yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. We started with a bang this first episode. West Indies on a record-breaking run. Unfortunately, it's not a good record. We've lost 9 ODIs in a row, concurrently to Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. And the record is 11, I think. So we've got 3 coming up against New Zealand. So that record is in danger of being broken. So naturally, in the region, it's cuss out season time. Everybody's getting a cuss out because fans are not happy at this. But Mash, we're going to look at how this isn't a recent problem. This hasn't started with Nicholas Pooran taking over. This hasn't started with Phil Simmons being coach. It's been a long-term rot in the white ball scene, particularly the ODIs. Dating back, I guess, Machel, to 2014, we would say.
Yeah, let's take this back and let's give people a history lesson. So if we just let's look at, as you say, the ODIs first in isolation. So I've done some data crunching, which will probably shock a lot of people who don't look into West Indies cricket from a data perspective. So in 2014, late 2014, we had that tour to India. This is circa when DJ Bravo was captain of the ODI side, and probably the last time we were super competitive as an ODI side. And obviously, Bravo, there was a massive kind of contract dispute in India in 2014. The senior players felt that Weeper had gone behind their back and negotiated a new kind of memorandum of understanding with the then West Indies Cricket Board. The players refused to sign. The players had gone to India without signing the contract. They then refused to play after the third ODI, and then the tour got abandoned. Dwayne Bravo was then kicked out of West Indies cricket, never to be seen again in ODI cricket. Pollard was never to be seen again, or he came back for 1 or 2 series and was never to be seen again for 2015 to 2019. Now, what I did, Santokie, was I went and pulled the data for that period of time. So just prior to that 2015 World Cup, Jason Holder was appointed as captain at the age of 23. And if you remember, Santokie, he'd barely just got into the ODI side. And he was appointed as captain to go into the World Cup. Since that World Cup, between 2015 and 2019, across all of the bilateral series we have played, we played 50 games. And we won 9.
I guess it's Mash. I guess it's similar to what happened in the test ball arena and test ball cricket. Essentially, we done a reset. We got Jason Holder at the helm as captain, and we said, look, we're going to start a cohort of young players who are going to be long-term take us to success. Obviously, in test cricket, we've kind of reached the stage where we're not great, but particularly at home, we're decent. We're like a mid-table side. In ODI cricket, the slump has just been continuing. And as you rightly said, up until Jason Holder was appointed just before the World Cup. After the World Cup, Chris Gale didn't play ODIs for 2 years. We lost a lot of players, a lot of experience. Kyron Pollard was outcast from the side as well. So Darren Sammy, eventually we lost Marlon Samuels as well. So we've lost a lot of experience. And if you look at that period after 2015, we had Andre Fletcher, Johnson Charles, Chandrapur Hemraj, Kieran Powell, Craig Brathwaite. We even went for Craig Brathwaite as an opener. We've just been experimenting with players, and there's not been a clear philosophy, and that's just led to this slump, which I can't see, based on the fact that at the moment our ODI side is essentially the strongest white ball players we have in the region. I can't see how we get out of this slump anytime soon, not least before the World Cup in India next year.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to attack this from.
Yeah.
So having given the stats that we won 9 out of 50 games between 2015 and 2019, and obviously that means we won 0 series between 2015 and so thing is, I'm glad you're laughing, because I said to someone recently, we actually have to laugh, because if you don't laugh, it's actually seriously depressing. But 0 series between 2015 and 2019. Now, under Phil, our record actually is better than people realize. the 9 defeats in a row notwithstanding, the record on the field currently is played 38, won 15, which is a win percentage of 39%. And the thing is, Santokie, this slump has actually just come this year. Prior to 2022, we actually had an over 50% win record. Something has changed this year, right? And I've got a few theories which I'm going to put to you, but it's worth people just noting that sometimes, Santokie, people can get caught up in the kind of short-termism and immediate kind of, oh, we've lost 9 in a row, so we've always been terrible. And yes, historically, we've always been terrible, but we haven't always been terrible on the field. We're terrible in 2022. Now, the question mark is this to me, Santokie. 2 players in particular haven't featured at all in ODI cricket in 2022. I think Evin may have featured at the start of the year versus Ireland, but 2 players basically haven't featured versus Bangladesh, haven't featured versus Pakistan, haven't featured versus India, home or away. And those 2 players are Shimron Hetmyer and Evin Lewis. And I'm not saying those 2 players being in the team would suddenly mean we'd win matches. But what I am saying to you, Santokie, and I want to see where you kind of lie on this, is we're not good enough to play without them. I'm not saying they're world beaters, but we're so weak as it is that if you take out 2 players who actually average above 35, it makes a significant difference to an already weak side.
100% spot on there, Mash. I think when you've got such a small talent pool as we have, to lose 2 world-class players, Shimron Hetmyer and Evin Lewis. I don't even think Evin Lewis played in the ODIs versus Ireland. I think it was his last ODI was against Australia maybe last year, along with Hetmyer. To lose those players, especially Evin Lewis at the peak of his career, experienced player, averaging 36 in ODIs, is a massive blow. And I think what we've seen in the ODIs, I think Carl Mayers has done an adequate job in replacing him in the ODIs. But we've seen that partnership with Shai Hope. Carl Mayers it hasn't gelled at the moment. Either one of them gets a big score and the other one goes out early. Whereas I think Lewis and Hope, particularly in the Sri Lanka series last year that we played, they had a good synergy together. There was a good partnership, a good understanding. And then you had the Darren Bravo to support with the ones. So it's ironic because, like you said, a lot of people will just jump to the conclusion that we've been terrible for ODIs for the past 5-6 years. But last year, we did discuss it on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. ODIs was probably our strongest format. We did have a good run against Sri Lanka. We lost to Australia. It was a tight series, 2-1. But we did look like a side on the up. But the loss of Evin Lewis, I'm sure we'll get into the circumstances around that, and Shimron Hetmyer as well. Hetmyer is someone who's inconsistent, but he has that ability to win you games. And especially in the ODIs against India, where it was such fine margins, you can imagine someone like Hetmyer could have taken us across the line. So, I think spot on there. 2 big players in the side who have gone, and we just haven't been able to replace them.
And you are right. Just to clarify, Santokie's right there. It was Justin Graves who opened versus Ireland. You're right. Evin didn't actually play. So
I'll add that to the list with him, March and Brathwaite.
Thing is, we're not even cussing there. It's just facts. It was Justin Graves who opened against Ireland. So yeah, we actually haven't had them for the whole year. And as Santokie kind of indicates there, the impact has been clear. But here's the thing, Santokie. We haven't had them, and to an outsider, and within some quarters of the Caribbean, people would say we must call them back into the side immediately. Now, let's give people the context here, because we still get messages probably on a daily basis saying, where's Evin Lewis? Where's Shimron Hetmyer? What do you mean West Indies haven't called them up? And I guess we have to address it, Santokie. Evin Lewis has been missing. I'm just going to repeat the story, people. Desmond Haynes said in a press conference that he had reached out to Evin Lewis about fitness. Evin Lewis has failed fitness tests before, and he'd reached out to Evin Lewis and said, Evin, what's the situation? Like, we're hearing you haven't taken a fitness test. Can you take the fitness test, please? This is paraphrasing the story. And in essence, Evin said, yeah, he's not taking a fitness test and he doesn't plan to take it anytime soon. West Indies have a very stringent policy towards fitness, which is you must pass certain criteria. Most notably, you must get over 40 on the yo-yo test or bleep test or whatever people want to call it. Shimron Hetmyer's situation is slightly different. His wife has had a baby, or his partner has had a baby, so he missed some of those series for paternity reasons. Then he picked up an injury, but he's also had his fitness issues as well. Santokie, would you? I'm not saying scrap the fitness test. I'm not that. No, because I'm not. I don't think we're gonna go that far. Would you do something like tweak the fitness test so as to get those two players to be selected, or do you look at it on the other side and say they're professional players? They're supposed to just pass the fitness test and done. How are we still? Because these two players, this isn't their first problem. This is now the third problem in Shimron's. In Shimron's case, it's 3 times. I think Evin now this is 3 times as well. Where do you stand on the line, Santa? Where do we draw the line for those two? Where it is, these are the standards. You know what you have to do. Just pass the test and done. Or do we look at our team and say, boy, we really can't afford to not have him in the side? Let's now change our policy. Where do you stand on it?
It's a tricky one because do you go for short-term benefits over sort of damaging the long-term reputation? I mean, because if you amend the fitness test criteria you've had for a few years in place now for 2 players, you're essentially saying they're bigger than the overall system and the standards. I think for fans, it's a tricky one because Evin Lewis plays in the IPL. He plays in franchise tournaments, and so there's obviously not a obvious fitness issue. But from West Indies' point of view, we're saying he's not fit enough to make the side. I think, bearing in mind Shimron Hetmyer worked hard on his fitness and passed the fitness test in Trinidad, I think you keep the standards in place because if Hetmyer is willing to work on it, I don't see why Lewis can't either. And if anything, you might say it's the fitness test standards are harsher than in franchise leagues or tougher, but that just encourages players to raise their levels, which is what we need. When West Indies, when you have such a small talent pool, things like fitness is where you win matches on, having a higher standard than other teams. So for me, I think the fact that Hetmyer has gone back, and a lot of people said mentally he's not in the game, he's not focused. He's gone back, he's worked hard, he's passed the fitness test, he's in the T20 side against India. I think if Hetmyer can do that, I don't see any reason why Lewis would. So at this point, I would say no, you don't tweak the test for players.
So people listening to this, I mean, by all means, send us your messages to at Carib Cricket and let us know what your views are on it. But hopefully that clears things up for people. It is not a case of Cricket West Indies refusing to well, they are refusing, but there's a reason why they're refusing or were refusing to select Lewis and Hetmyer. Other nations don't have these problems over and over and over again. And I think my stance is pretty clear. You're a professional cricketer. Like the optimum word there being professional. Why are we begging these players? Why are we begging them to do something so simple? There has to be some kind of standard as a professional that you accept you have to reach. Now, for all we know, there may be something further behind the scenes that hasn't been said yet. But we can only give you what we know, and that is the official story as it currently stands. But Santokie, I mean, Lewis and Hetmyer, that's in the batting air. That's in the batting department. Even if they came back, such is the way with West Indies that when we fix one problem, another problem. It's like it's like whack-a-mole. You whack down one problem, and then another problem suddenly appears out of nowhere. And my thing is, I also think, and you and I have been kind of messaging each other back and forth about this, we actually have a bowling issue as well in ODIs. And it kind of goes under the radar a bit because we don't necessarily have quote unquote world-class players who are on the outside looking in to come into the bowling rank. So bowling wise, I'd say apart from Alzari Joseph, possibly you'd throw in Akil Hussain because of his meteoric rise over the last year. Obviously, Gudakesh has just kind of come into the side, but go past them. And in ODI cricket, what else have we got?
Yeah.
And that sounds harsh, but what I mean is, what else have we got where you're saying bona fide wicket takers?
Yeah, 100%. There's definitely, for the past few years, across both formats, ODIs and T20s, we've had a problem with strike bowlers specifically, bowlers who can take wickets. We're lucky in T20s, we've got Obed McCoy, but if you look, we've had to try out Fidel Edwards, Ravi Rampal, and then ODIs. Someone you spoke to earlier this week, Mash, Kimar Roach, he played earlier this year, but we haven't seen him since. But that kind of highlights the fact that he says he's been pigeonholed as a red ball player, but if you think about it, it also showed our desperation that we had to call him back to the ODI setup, age 33 at the time, just because we have no white ball players who can take wickets at the moment. This is a massive problem. You're not going to win ODIs if you can't take at least 7-8 wickets in over 50 overs. It's something we struggled with. So we've got, as you said, we've got a problem at the top end with the opener positions and that kind of solidifying that middle order. But for me, the massive problem is just the pace bowling, strike bowlers. We're struggling at the moment. Alzari Joseph has lost his consistency. Obed McCoy's not fit enough. He hasn't got the health. He hasn't got the health to kind of play 50 overs. I don't think we ever see him play 50 overs. I think he'll be limited to 20 overs. So we've come with Jaden Seals. He's obviously inexperienced. You can't expect him to come in straight away and take wickets. Where are we getting a strike bowler from in white ball cricket? It's hard to see it in the ODIs.
I have an answer. But I've got no names to call. I literally have no. Sheldon Cottrell's the only name I can think of, but even he's got his injury roles at the moment. And with respect to Sheldon, I don't see Sheldon as a banker. Like he's not like don't get me wrong, there'll be matches where Sheldon will take 3 wickets, but he's not he's not a bowler you'd say every match he's bound to strike for us. But in the context of West Indies cricket, he's probably the best option on the outside currently looking in, but he is currently not being selected due to injury woes. But beyond Sheldon, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, Santokie. The fact we've called in Jaden Seals, who's not even 21 yet, to try and be our strike bowler in ODIs, that in itself is hugely problematic. I don't think he's ready. But what who else do we have?
But Mash, what do you think? Because obviously we'll have a lot of new listeners who haven't listened to us before. They'll be thinking, hold on, you guys, this is the region that produced, Michael Holding, Malcolm Marshall, Joel Garner. What's gone on with your pace bowling? Obviously in a region, well, it's been rendered in the past few years, but long term for the past 15 years, we've seen very, very heavy spin-friendly pitches across the region, particularly Guyana, Trinidad, but even at Sabina Park, for instance, where spinners have prevailed. Do you think that's caused the long-term systematic issues with our region's pace bowlers just don't know how to take wickets on these pitches?
Yeah, I think there's a twofold issue as well. Now, to give Cricket West Indies their due, in the red ball competition, they have recently introduced bonus points if fast bowlers take wickets. So let's not highlight that they are trying to do something. So they're obviously trying to encourage grounds people to produce tracks which at least are a bit more friendly to fast bowlers. So that's one issue there that they are trying to rectify. But I think on the other hand as well, I mean, I look at okay, so I'm going to go across the different territorial teams, and so just to try and give people some names. So Barbados, Chamar Holder, who's had some injury woes. Keon Harding played when we took a C team to Bangladesh. He's not really ready yet. Guyana, Niall Smith, is he really ready yet? Jamaica, Nicholson Gordon or Marquino Mindley, are they really ready yet? Trinidad, we've even tried Shannon Gabriel in the past. We've currently thrown in Jaden Seal like a lamb to the slaughter. So that's the quote-unquote big four. Leeward Islands, maybe we'll have to turn to someone like a Jeremiah Louis because he's been taking wickets in the first-class tournament. And then Windward Islands, we had Sherman Lewis on tour in the Netherlands. I mean, people will say Preston McSween, but when I say these names to you, Santokie, none of them are... Who's ready? Who's actually ready? And this is almost the problem for West Indies. No one's ready because with respect, our domestic tournaments, the jump from them to West Indies International, it's like jumping. Sorry for the wrestling reference for those who are like, you're going to make a wrestling reference on this pod. Yes, we are. It's like jumping from the indie scene to main event in WrestleMania. The jump is huge, and we haven't had. And let's be fair, Santokie, since COVID, what domestic cricket have we had anyway?
Yeah, we had the Super 50 in 2019, then there was a gap because of COVID. last year we had the Super 50, but it was only what, a 3-week tournament. So you've essentially, if you're a regional player, in the past 3 years, you've had 3 weeks to play 50 over cricket against other regional sides. How are you then going to develop and play against the West Indies? We saw essentially the C team that went to Bangladesh in early 2021 was essentially the quote unquote best of the regional outside of the guys that had pulled out. And we saw how they struggled, capitulated. So how are you going to bridge the gap between that Super 50 and playing for West Indies? There's no real way to do it. We've got another Super 50 tournament coming up in November. Again, that will probably be 3 to 4 weeks. Are players really going to learn in that period how to adjust and play for West Indies at that level? And then we've got a World Cup coming up in just over a year. So it's hard to see how any players from the region are going to make a case for getting into the side. But when the first team is struggling anyway so badly, it's hard to kind of see much optimism going forward short term. There's obviously long term you can development coaching plans that can kind of gear players for this. But for the next 2 to 3 years, Mash, I really don't see this. Much as I'd like to be positive, I really don't see our fortunes changing in the ODI side.
Yeah, no, I'm going to put even more kind of bleak and stark than that. My whole thing with West Indies in ODI cricket is I start with the notion in my head we're going to lose. That's my default whenever I watch a game. And people can say to me, "Oh, Mash, you're so negative." No, I think that's just realistic. I start with the notion we're probably going to lose this, and if we then win, I can celebrate and I can lime and I can jump up and down and play some music. But the reality is we're going to lose. And I hark back to when I went to the Netherlands to watch us play the Netherlands, Santokie, those games were much closer than people realize, right? It said on paper it was 3-0, but in actual ringside seats when I was watching in the Netherlands, it was much closer. We arguably should have. There were points in 2 games out of the 3 where if the Netherlands had executed, we would have lost those matches. So,
Yeah.
and that's why when we lost 2-1 to Ireland, part of me is also like, well, realistically, isn't that our level? And nobody wants to hear that because I think what people are stuck on is people are still, believe it or not, Santokie, I reckon people are still stuck on the name West Indies. So you know how like in football, people like will hear famous names from the past and you'll be like, AC Milan without ever realizing, I know they just won the Scudetto, but like they'll hear a name and they'll be like, that team's much bigger than the actual reality. So Manchester United right now are a flop, but everyone hears the name Manchester United and assumes it still means something in the grand scheme of things. And I sometimes wonder with West Indies if people haven't adjusted their mentality to what we actually are. We still carry the name and we're still main event status based on our legendary antics, but we're actually we're actually in ODI cricket. Certainly, I think we're an associate side or just above it.
Well, if anyone wants to know what we're about, we've had an Italian football reference there, a wrestling reference. So expect references from all angles coming to us. But Mash, we spent a good 22, 23 minutes talking about the perils of the ODI side. I guess let's highlight one outstanding aspect. Shai Hope, one of the world's leading ODI batsmen. Obviously, he's fallen off in Test cricket. T20, he's a strange one because T20 cricket, he hasn't really adapted to the pace of it. But it's like ODI cricket is perfectly suited to him. We saw that century in his 100th game against India. He just looks like he knows how to play the format. He averages a touch under 50, which is remarkable for a West Indian batsman. Very, very comfortable in that opener spot. He's someone we can rely on to get runs pretty much most of the time. Kind of, how would you highlight how exceptional a job Shai Hope's been doing in the team? And if Shai Hope can do it, why haven't other batsmen been able to perform as well?
That's a really good question, you know. And first things first, I think there's two. We have to look at 2 different things here because believe it or not, after which ODI did he get the century in? Is it the first? I can't even remember which one's which now. The second one.
Yeah, second.
People were questioning or still critiquing or criticizing. I don't know if that's too strong. His strike rate. Just very quickly, I'm just going to say this in the context of our West Indies team. We do not have time to be criticizing Shai Hope's strike rate when we've got one batter and one batter only who can consistently produce in this format of cricket. We haven't got time to be criticizing his strike. He's the one person doing what he's supposed to actually be doing. So I haven't got time to be saying in the weakness of our ODI cricket, let's go after the best player before we look at any other situation within the ODI. So there will come a time, hopefully, in the future where we look at Shai Hope's strike rate and say, boy, that needs to improve, but we're not there yet because there's so many other aspects of our game that needs to improve. But answering the actual main question you said there, Santokie, this is where I wonder. And again, anybody who's got any thoughts on this, find us on Twitter at Carib Cricket, send in whatever comments you've got to say. This is where I question the players, Santokie. So Shai Hope's approach to ODI cricket reminds me of Shiv Chanderpaul's approach to Test cricket. Now, let me break it down. I don't mean in strike rate. That's not my point. But what I do mean is in the sheer, and actually, let's say Craig Brathwaite in Test cricket presently, that sheer single bloody mindedness to be like, I'm gonna succeed. I'm gonna make sure I score no matter what. And what it says to me is, where is the line then between how much a coach can have an impact on a player and how much of it is about a player's desire to want to be the best? In this present era of West Indies cricket, it is unheard of that we've got a player averaging over 50. Like, we thought we'd gone past that era where we had players that good. So I just think that Shai, we don't know why he's not cracked it in tests yet, but in ODI cricket, certainly, this has to be put on him. He has the winner's mentality in that format of cricket. And it just makes me question some of the other players to be like, well, how much desire maybe some will say I'm being too simplistic, but how much desire do they have to be the best? And I just think Shai has that in ODI cricket, and some of the other players could maybe take a leaf out of his book, possibly in terms of dedication to his craft. That's where I see it.
This also links, I guess there's been a lot of talk about the relevance of ODI cricket. It could just be perhaps we've got a lot of T20 specialists in the side. Maybe they just don't see ODI as being that premier format for themselves. Whereas obviously, like we said, Shai Hope's he's not made it in the Test arena. He's not made it in T20. So he's kind of forced himself to focus on ODI. So it could be a wider issue on how relevant ODIs are. But I 100% agree with you, Mash. I think when you've got a side which has so much batting power in it and ability to go over 100 strike rate, Pooran, Odean Smith, Romario Shepherd, Jason Holder, but even Brandon King can attack. You don't need Shai Hope to be playing a blistering innings at the top of the order. You just need him to solidify and everyone to bat around him. He knows his role. He knows his job. It's just for the others to step up and fit into their roles. And so for me, I think it's easy to cuss out Shai Hope's strike rate. We obviously come from a region where the cuss out is inevitable for anyone if you're not winning games. But it's unjust, I think, for Shai Hope. I think he's the one player in the side he's exceeding expectations based on the state of the West Indies side. So for me, yeah, no, Shai Hope's definitely been a star shining light in this ODI side, despite our slump.
So let me put this question to you then, Santokie. Lay it out on the line. We've got a year till the World Cup 2020, the ODI World Cup, 2023 World Cup. New Zealand are due to arrive in the West Indies basically next week for their 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. But let's focus on ODIs. Do you think we will we break the record and lose all will we break the record and lose all 3 ODIs to New Zealand? But a wider question than that is, do you think we're heading to the World Cup qualifiers for the ODI World Cup? And if you do think we're going to go to the qualifiers, do you think we'll even make it out of the World Cup qualifiers?
Listen, you set me up for a lot of negativity there. I think when you look at New Zealand squad, no sympathy. They named Bolt, Salvi, their full squad is coming for us. I think we can take heart from the fact that India ODIs were very close. Maybe that can build some confidence. So hopefully we can just scramble to 1 win. I'll take a 2-1 loss as long as we just don't break this record, because the cuss out will be unprecedented on Pooran, I think, at this point, if we do break the record. I think in terms of the World Cup, thank you, South Africa, for forfeiting the series against Australia next year, because that's given us a massive boost and probably means we won't have to go to qualifiers. If we do have to go to qualifiers in Zimbabwe next year, we saw what happened last time. The umpire teeth out against Scotland. Even that, the teeth out, we were still ready to lose. The rain had to come in. And we celebrated like we won the World Cup. So I don't know if we'll get that fortune again this time in the World Cup qualifiers. It's going to be very, very tricky. I think the thing is, when you're a test playing nation in these World Cup qualifiers, there's obviously a bullseye on your head. Everyone wants to step up their performances and take you out because you're essentially the team to beat. So I think associate nations, we've seen they've closed the gap. We've seen it so many sides. Ireland, Netherlands. Well, Ireland are test player now, but Netherlands. We've seen them step up the level. So I think it's going to be very, very hard for us to finish in the top 2 of qualifiers. I think we will be favourites, but you'd rather not have to go through that. So yeah, I guess a lot in the air, Mash. A lot in the air. I think I'm optimistic we can get one win against New Zealand, and I'm optimistic we'll qualify for the World Cup, but only because of circumstances outside of our control, namely South Africa giving up points for the bag.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying we'll qualify automatically, or are you saying we'll qualify through the qualifiers?
No, I think we'll qualify automatically because I think South Africa are so far behind. Looking at the table, it looks like no one can catch us up, basically, now that South Africa have forfeited. I could be wrong, but it looks like we're in a strong position, even if we lost all 3 against New Zealand, to somehow snake through into the World Cup automatically. If we have to go to Zimbabwe against qualifiers, then boy, we might have to scrap that fitness test for Evin Lewis, you know?
Listen, if we go to World Cup qualifiers, listen, everyone's got to go.
Hey, listen, you got Chris Gale on WhatsApp, you know? I might have to bellman for the qualifiers.
Anybody who's ever played West Indies in the past has to be eligible for selection. If we're going to the World Cup qualifiers, bring back Shiv, bring back Sarwan, bring back Gale, bring back Samuel, everyone.
Machel might be in Harare, you know, battling in that 4th spot after he passes the bleep test. Listen, guys, I think we said before this episode we'll talk about ODI cricket and T20 cricket. As usual, we've gone over 30 minutes just looking at the ODI. So the good thing about West Indies on 99.94, we're going to be here 3 times a week. So we'll be back again in a few days to discuss the T20 side, namely to look at how we went from Chris Gale opening and Evin Lewis to Shamar Brooks in 2022 and a lot more. So stay tuned for that. But Mash, I think one thing that's highlighted the need for us to be on 99.94 is, you mentioned it, maybe off air, the Evin Lewis story. No one's covering it. If Jason Roy was not in the England side because of fitness issues and he was having a back and forth with the selectors about it, it would be across all major cricket websites. We haven't seen anything about Evin Lewis. We might be the first guys. You were the only person in the press conference to ask Desmond Haynes about it, and we're probably the only people talking about it in depth. So I guess that highlights why it's so important to have West Indies coverage on 99.94.
Most definitely. And people, we're going to try and get to the bottom of this and hear from Evin Lewis at some point in the near future, because all we've got so far from Evin Lewis is cuss outs on Facebook in true West Indian style. He's taken to social media to cuss out Cricket West Indies. So you can guarantee that we'll try to get to the bottom of this. But as Santokie says, technically, this was episode 1. We know that Jared introduced us in the kind of real episode 1, but this was episode 1 of West Indies on 99.94. If you've got anything to say about anything we've discussed on this particular episode, do feel free to send us messages on Twitter. You can find us at Carib Cricket. Do send us messages, and if you send us anything interesting, we shall read it out as well. You can also email us caribcricket@gmail.com if you've got any kind of questions you want us to raise on the show. But Santokie, is goodbye from me. Is it goodbye from you?
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And like I said, there's never a dull day in West Indies cricket. Next episode, we'll be back with what Barbados are playing in the Commonwealth Games. John Campbell's got his hearing regarding the doping on Tuesday in Jamaica. So there'll be a lot to talk about. So guys, stay tuned and we'll be back in a few days on 99.94.
Stay locked, people.